let's get this started, folks, everyone, wherever you're coming from, whatever parts of the world, morning, afternoon. Thank you so much. So Sysonex, as a company, we deliver risk management solutions, software and services for our clients throughout the globe. Um, so um, just want to get started, but before getting started, I always like to give a quick review of just a very small risk that seems to um, uh, from Canada in this case. So huge amount of boreal forest in Canada, thousands and thousands of acres of forest is actually lost on a annual basis for a small bug. It's called, this beetle, and what it does, it actually buries whole, and it has, it leaves its larvae inside of these trees. So what you see is not a picture of trees and autumn. Rather, what you see are trees really dying because of a small risk, a small entity that impacts, Canada's forests in British Columbia, in Alberta, Saskatchewan. So just wanted to share that with you. So today we are talking about AI-driven risk management for board executives, where we're going to look at IRA, we're going to look at SysRisk, and our solutions. So, what we're seeing overall more and more that the area of risk management is definitely changing. We're seeing that there's the need, want, urge of of oversight request. There's a requirement for accountability. There's a requirement for involvement, insight, data-driven views that are all requested. When we think about oversight request, think about Tesla board members where they're looking at supply chain risk, AI governance, climate risk, cybersecurity, and there's many discussions around that. When you look at, say, accountability, a example comes to mind where Wells Fargo actually opened, employees were, opening thousands of these accounts and others customer accounts to meet aggressive sales targets. So board accountability issues that we were realized was that there's a failure of oversight. There's a risk culture that was ignored, and there was a delayed response. So now boards are saying, you know what, we are definitely accountable, and we need to look at this on a regular basis. From a increased involvement level, a example you can actually see is with Open AI board. There was an OpenAI board shakeup that occurred in November 2023, where the CEO was actually fired because the whole philosophy and the idea that that OpenAI started with, it was not reflected. However, there's subsequent changes that has happened to the board itself. With regards to insights, there's SEC that's SEC cybersecurity rules that have been really requested, and also with NIST, CSF, and CISA guidelines that are being requested as different organizations, different institutions, board from a cybersecurity perspective, naming Capital One. That's a highlighted board activity that they really want to see security and security related oversight more introduced within the organization. From a data-driven, this is a very interesting one. From a Pfizer's board, they really used data to drive a lot of their decisions on whether they want to, like for reduced clinical trial data, the modeling scenarios and public health projections. It was all data driven, and based on that, they said, you know what, let's go ahead releasing the medication, and the decision was grounded on data, on safety, and mRNA scalability. So overall, boards, organizations in today's landscape, they're looking at this regularly. What are my oversights that we need to have in the organization? What are the insights that we can provide? What are the accountabilities that we have, involvement, and how is our organization going to be data driven? We talk to customers, and we notice that. In every case, for risk management, they definitely want to be enhanced data driven. They definitely want to have the insights. And in all cases, I noticed that right now AI is coming into play, and definitely our clients do use IRA on a real time oversight, on a real time involvement. For understanding the data, for understanding accountability and insight. So for this slide, I want to talk about the boards and a little bit about their risk management appetite. And the risk management appetite is really more directed by the type of board that you have. So, we all have our favorite kinds of boards, but, we get to work with lots of different boards with different culture. So the board that I've noticed recently is, where there's large, trust placed with regards to the senior execs who also report directly to the board. And that's the pacifist board. The pacifist board is really on a day-to-day basis. They're looking at, say, visualizing. They're looking at prioritizing, but not the active engagement, not the directional level that you'd expect from the warrior board. Who are really looking at, from a counterculture. They're really looking at centralized collaboration. They're looking at active governance. They're looking at the data on a regular basis. So, but the pacifist board, and a lot of times, is extremely large organizations, while the warrior board might be the board members who are themselves investors in the company itself. It may be a startup. The tantric board is a board where they're actually looking at more engagement, more support, but instead of direct engagement, these are more like suggestions, guidance, and you're again looking at data for visualization, supporting prioritization, but the level of prioritization, the level of visualization, the level of governance that they're looking at from a tantric board is almost, as I mentioned, opposite to the active board, where the active board, instead of aggressively pursuing something, they're definitely carefully ensuring that the visualization, the prioritization, the governance aspect, the central collaboration, and the data-driven decision making does occur. And the last one that I want to mention is the mentor type of board, where the board, it's not necessarily that they're aggressively pursuing ideas or thoughts, but rather they're definitely pursuing the guidance of the entire organization. The mentor board, this is pretty much my favorite board, where individual board members are very well known for their own capabilities, are very well known for the value that they bring, and they're involved not from a perspective of day-to-day operations, or support or engage in actual engagement, but rather guide the exec towards a common direction for the entire organization. So from this slide, I want to talk about what are the capabilities based on the different kinds of boards that we see that individuals are really asking for. What we see more and more are that our board members, they want to visualize, you know, they want to prioritize, they want to have the ability for central collaboration, uh, you know, uh, they want to have data driven decision making, and they want to have governance. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, that not all boards are the same. Not all boards really look at the world in a similar way. So definitely there's different levels or different degrees of priority that the different board members provide to these items. So from visualization level, we noticed that definitely board members, as the tools are available, they're looking at advanced, concise, and actionable visualizations so they can support on their strategic oversight duty. And again, it depends on the type of board you're looking at, whether their level of visualization that they're asking for. Prioritization capabilities, really focusing on what matters most for the organization, and essential collaboration with regards to risk and efficient governance and secure decision making. That is something that we're also noticing with some of our clients where board members are really want to collaborate. In this case, this is really all about the mentor type of board where mentorship is key, and board members as well as senior execs are actually working hand in glove towards steering the organization towards success. So the other part, that's about the data-driven decision making. So this is an interesting one. In some cases, um, the board members who are savvy, who have access to the data, they definitely want to see this. In a lot of cases where the board members are at arm's length operations, they do want to see the data, but data visualized for their own needs, for their own reporting purposes. From a governance level, better governance definitely required for trust, performance, compliance, and long-term value creation. So this is what we're really noticing from our different clients with regards to the risk management capabilities that the boards they want most: visualize, prioritize, centrally collaborate, data-driven decision making, and governance. So how do you really tie in all of these together in a particular framework? So when we're looking at actual process, actual flow. So this is something that we've seen from a depth, from a top down to down top approach. What we see is who are the individuals that are involved on a day-to-day risk operations, on a day-to-day review of risk management activities in the organization. And we tend to forget that there's frontline staff members involved. There's different business stakeholders involved. Definitely the humble risk analyst is there. Our risk managers, risk monitor, risk auditing by our director, our line, or individual directors, and finally the corporate board. What do they do? In this case, the line staff is looking at enterprise data collection. The business stakeholder are actually looking at the data and they're articulating risk throughout the entire enterprise on understanding what are the risk that is associated with their line of business. The risk analyst is looking at actually resolving those individual risk items. Risk managers are ensuring risk controls are in place with risk dashboard, insight, and reporting being present. And finally, risk appetite and risk management is being delivered by the corporate board. So what are the activities that they're actually doing on a regular basis? And again, your frontline staff, they're looking at finding data, loading data, entering, update data. Business stakeholders are looking at the controls, ensuring data fidelity, monitoring the risk register. The risk analysts are looking at tracking the risk, monitoring and prioritizing review risk as they are triaged. The risk managers, they're improving the workflow, risk resolution workflow, the self-assessment or risk and control self-assessment. And the risk or the line directors, they're looking at visualization, aggregating the visualization, and definitely monitoring. And finally, the corporate board, which is our main area of conversation, they're looking at visualization, governance, and strategic direction, as well as overseeing management maturity. So this is a common framework that we've seen work again and again for different types of board, different types of organization, and that actually has the flow both from top to down and down to top migration of workflow, activities, engagement, etc. So now I want to take you to the next slide, where we look at the life cycle itself. So let's look at the life cycle. So, so what we're seeing more and more is that risk management is not it's not a activity um, that is chaotic. It is not a activity that is that fulfills its purpose when it does not have a mission statement. Um, a norming, forming, and well performing risk management team and board, in this case, they not only look at the process that you saw from the engagement level, but also looks at the life cycle of risk. So more and more we see that there are individuals or team members who are looking at the life cycle, and they're looking at, we need to identify the risk, we need to ensure that risk is approved, we need to ensure that there's risk prioritization happening, risk resolutions occurring, risk closure, there's risk governance at the central, and there's a tool sets or visualization of RCSA, risk dashboard, risk control, risk appetite, and risk threshold that are present. So looking back at the individual stakeholders that are involved, the board supports and encourages individuals for risk identification as part of its culture. The board ensures that there's a process or there's an engagement level that is present that enables and allows your risk approvals to occur. In this case, for risk prioritization, the board actually, in different kinds of boards, as I mentioned, they provide different levels of risk prioritization based on the organization itself. Risk resolution, not necessarily the task of the board, but definitely they want to ensure that there's a steady flow of risk resolution that occurs. With regards to risk closure, also they're looking at KPIs that are actually being fulfilled. The area that they might want to look at or know more about is the RCSA, the risk dashboard, the risk control, risk appetite, and risk threshold. So the aggregate from the overall value that is driven after risk management is where the board is focused. And the other part is definitely risk governance. So overall life cycle, but overall life cycle output or resultant effect that you can see via risk governance, RCSA, risk dashboard, controls, appetite, and threshold. That's where a lot of the interest for different kinds of board members actually lie. So, at the end of the day, as risk practitioners, we are all trying to empower our enterprise. We identify risk, crush non-compliance, and drive seamless innovation. So from here, I want to show you, I give you a demo of our product and its AI capabilities and how our clients are using AI to better manage their risk and visualize, prioritize, deliver on governance from a risk management and governance for different organizations. Okay, let me know if you guys can see this. Okay, thank you. So when somebody logs in into their risk dashboard or risk, this is what they tend to see. First of all, you actually log in into the organization itself. But once you're logging in, you have the ability to see the different modules that you have. And in this case, there's enterprise risk management, project risk management, compliance, third-party risk management, regulatory risk management, and contract risk management, also with the admin module. But our focus is really with the enterprise risk management. So we're going to take you to the enterprise risk management area. And as I mentioned before, that there is a dashboard that is, more and more boards want to see prioritized dashboard, which is something that you can't really see when you are looking at say an Excel sheet or a PowerPoint slide, or the data itself is not live. It's not readily available, and this is something that we've provided for our clients, where the data itself is readily available on a regular basis. The board can see the data and the information, and not only see the information, but they can click individual items, and they can ultimately see the different slides, risk monitoring, what are the items that are being monitored, what are the total risk portfolio target, what are the total risk items, etc. And then also, these are just generic views that the solution provides, all fed by, the data and the analytics for the organization. So, as I mentioned about the life cycle, there's the ability for risk entry. There's the ability for, in this case, for a risk approvals queue. So you not only enter data, and you create the inception of a risk. But once you've created the inception of a risk, you're saying that, is this something that the team really wants to approve or get it, make it available for the rest of the organization? And you can select different categories such as environmental, political, financial, reputational, technical, operational, business risk. From there, what you're doing once you've actually approved a risk, and this is where the approval process comes in. And the approval can come in based on the line of business owner, in this case a director or even a vice president. They can engage with a group of team members, or they might have somebody that they allow to actually further look at this particular screen, where the team comes in and actually approves, request changes, and rejects. This is an area that AI can automate and deliver value by saying, you know what, under this threshold or above this threshold, you can definitely approve, request changes, or reject these different kinds of risk. And again, all of these risks are actually stored in one place. So as a result, you're not going to your Excel sheet, you're not going to your PowerPoint to say, okay, guys, let's open our recent Excel sheet to see what needs to be approved. And also, it's not that chaotic. It also enables collaboration. This is the risk register item, where you can actually look at an individual risk that's already been uploaded. You can start adding notes. You can look at the different logs, different information that has happened. You can save the risk. You can also upload documents against a risk. So, Excel or in this case, a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint is not amenable to storing documentation. Your folder structure is not amenable towards storing documentation, but using uploading documentation, you're having risk controls. You can actually ensure that what are the risk controls tied with a specific risk, and you can just visualize that all in one location. So the risk itself is really encompassed within the object of the meta description, as well as the documents that it actually is present, as well as the risk controls that it actually is impacted by. And you can actually copy this item and just simply send in a Slack, or in this case Teams, to your team members, and they can also start working on the same risk item that you're working on as a collaborative mechanism. There's risk prioritization, as you mentioned, that the board, so this is the dashboard that a board wants to see. So it's not a dashboard that is what you may call that is stagnant. It is not saying that this dashboard is updated once a year. Rather, it's updated on a continuous basis. Continuously, you can look at all the different risks that are present, the risk life cycles. You identify the major, minor, moderate risks, and it gives you a filtered view of those risks. You can, from there, look at the trend, the risk trend and life cycle changes, the risk trend prioritization, and any other views that you want. And some of our clients have customized these views for themselves, for their own boards, where they've actually added, the health of the risk control in this same dashboard view. But we've kept this generic view for everybody. Risk prioritized scatter plot, also important. And then finally, the cost-related scatter plot that actually shows you where the cost centers are and how the cost is actually being distributed. So, and again, within this tool, you can actually filter different views. The board can filter. Let's find all the moderate items. Let's find all the critical items, and you can individually filter them based on this. But not only can you do that, you can actually go pinpoint the actual critical item individually. You can also look at that particular critical item or this particular item itself, and go there to see that these are the areas that fit within that gradient. So again, the board has the ability to not only visualize or prioritize the data, they also have the ability to make decisions based on this data, to understand and support that regular engagement. So instead of a static, unengaged board, you definitely become much more engaged, much more of a active board that you really want. From here, you can also do the risk reporting. You can generate the risks on a particular risk item and see the values tied to it, and you can download all of this data on a regular basis to your dashboard and share it with the team, and also risk closure. So now that you've seen the overall risk life cycle for any organization or for any way that we actually deliver risk itself, we want to take it to IRA. And this is where the board members are coming to say that I know that I prioritize my risk. I know that I'm actually able to look at my risks, but what happens with regards to engaging and involving and identifying new risk? So all of these risk items that you see, we can actually do it on a time basis or time-bound basis, where it's actually automated, and you can create a particular industry sector. Let's just go with, say, manufacturing. You can look at a division. You can look at a particular framework, and you can say water pollution due to industrial site. And again, but here you can see that you can actually search with the company information. And the company information is created, or it's updated by yourself when you're in your admin module. And the admin module gives you the ability to not only look at the overall admin areas, but also to update your own company settings, where you can update your company information, your company profile, your company strategy items, your company onboarding status. You can review them. Okay. So your company strategy items, you can provide them one by one, and these strategy items are then further added to your overall views of the different strategy and risk relationship. And if you notice this company profile, you collect this information, and after the collection of this information, what we're really doing is in the enterprise risk, when you're doing a identification of risk, in this case, I think we added mining as a mining coal in this case, again, environment impact of coal mining. You can do a you can do a search with the company information, or you can actually say, you know what, this is a net new project, net new area. So just want to search by ourselves on an individual level just to understand the industry itself. So based on the data that is being provided, the information, and also roughly about 20 years of risk-related data from industry as well as from an organizational level. It aggregates that data, it collects that data, and then it suggests risk items based on sector, division, framework, and current trends that we see in society. So based on that, if you notice, it's saying that regulatory permitting delays is a risk, water resource stress, community opposition, operational disruption, and it also provides you a risk score against it, impact score, likelihood score, etc. So you can then say, you know what, I want to accept, or the board member can say, you know what, I want to accept this risk. And after they accept this risk, they can actually go through this process and actually just simply create a new risk. So once a new risk has actually been created, if you notice right over here, you need to go through that same process of adding the risk area, risk resolution, in this case, not known, risk owners, you need to add, this is your 3I, you can also provide 4Is, so that way all the individuals who are supposed to be partaking in this risk item, you can actually have their names there. And you can update this information. You can provide, say, damage cost tied to it, and then you can actually just save this. But as soon as you've actually saved it, it's a risk entry that has been created successfully. You go to your risk entry and you see that this is a risk entry view. A risk entry view is not necessarily a item that is actually ready and approved. So it can still be unapproved, still be going through the workflow where it can be declined. And you save this and you ask for approval. So you've thought about it, you've understood it, and you actually say, you know what, I really want to push it to our team member, our board members, and ensure that they can actually review it. And in that risk approval queue, you have this item. You can approve it, you can request for changes, you can reject it. You can request for changing by just sending a message, and that message goes back to the risk entry. And once it's approved, it actually goes to the. So now what's happening is that all the individuals who are supposed to receive that risk item is being broadcasted that, hey, a new risk has been created, and you get this large ID that stores all the different types of risk for your organization. And if you notice, you've not started on it, but you can just save the risk and start a timer, and you can get started on this activity. And you can add notes, new notes from board. Okay, not only add notes, you can download the log and actually have that available. So now that you've actually got this risk available, you can then go back to IRA that, hey, you know what, I found this risk, but I really feel that that there's a specific risk item, I believe. Yes, this is a coal item one. So you can now select this risk and you can actually search for a risk resolution. So what we're seeing is that this particular risk item itself, we want to identify how we're actually going to resolve the risk tied to this particular item. And we're going to, in this case, it actually is working. So what it's doing is, again, you have your aggregate risk items, you have your aggregate resolutions, And based on those aggregate risk and resolutions and your appetite, it is now trying to find a risk resolution. The risk resolution was successful, and it actually provides you with guidance on how to resolve that risk, where you can look at phase one, which is a halt or delay active site. You can look at establishing a dedicated environment. You can look at identifying an approach. So we're just going to quickly accept it and see that what they're actually talking about. Phase 103. So that same risk item with regards to the coal mining operation that we see, we can now accept this as a risk resolution. And we can add this selected item to that risk item. And if you notice, it just added this particular item, and you can just save this. It's now saved, and that's saved as the risk resolution. So you now not only can identify risk, you can actually provide resolution to that risk. And as always, you can download the log, you can share it with your colleagues, you can provide information to different individuals. So I'm going to close this, and then we're going to go back to IRA to say that we've identified risk. The board member has done this. The board member has actually driven the risk resolution. From there, we want to see what are the risk controls that are actually can be delivered. So this is the recent one that we're just looking at. And again, let's just show that we have this information. And the individual can actually say, you know what, let's actually select this and permitting delays enforcement, because we know that this resolution is really going to help. So let's actually select and view, and let's see what the risk resolution or the actual risk controls that can be added for this particular item. So as I mentioned, the board member now being the individual can be a pacifist type of board, or even an active type of board, can be a member of a active board member, or somebody who just participates as the meetings continue. But they can now identify the risk, discover the resolution, and also provide the risk controls. Also provide the risk control tied with that information. And this information is now being shown that, hey, you know what? For this particular risk resolution, the controls that we can actually have are effective. And this is the view that you have. You can lower this risk. You can accept it. And you can actually submit. And that is now added as a risk control for that specific type of risk that you've seen. So from identifying risk, discovering risk, risk control. I want to go to RCSA last, because that's something that we tend to do on a end of the year. But in this tool using AI, you can do RCSA real-time, regular basis. So the root cause analysis, let's look at that same item that we just looked at, where we looked at I believe it's regulatory permitting delays. This is the one that we looked at. And again, we're going to look for root cause analysis in this case. So the board member now has the ability to identify a risk for a specific project. The resolution of those risks for that specific project, identify the controls that are required to be implemented for that specific projects. And then you can actually say that, how do you ensure that you have the ability to look at root cause analysis? So we've enabled two items, and this is the fishbone analysis, where the corrective actions and the preventive actions are provided with residual monitoring. And again, this is information you can then may select to accept or upload and add into your overall solution. Or you can actually also say, you know what, let's do a 5 whys analysis. And these are the 5 whys analysis. And you can add this also to your risk documentation. So as I mentioned, important to realize you don't have to get outside of this application to deliver on risk or risk management for your organization. It's all in one location. And not only that, as I mentioned, you can go through all of these other modules that also deliver on risk. So we've done identify, discover, we've done risk control, root cause analysis. We really want to look at strategy and risk relationship. So, the strategy item that we added, we can now add and identify what are the different risk items that tied to it. So in this case, you might have 2 or 3 or 4 of these different strategy items. You can look at them and you can say, you know what, update the risk relationships. So now here's a strategy item. This strategy item, it has maybe within the entire organization, you have like, say, 30, 40. I think in this case, we've got test data for about 80 risks. So now it's saying that what are the risks tied to this particular strategy item that delivers on these risk items. So now you're driving strategy based on the risk. And that's something that, a lot of individuals talking about which of my risks are driving my strategy. It's not an afterthought. It is really a ongoing activity. So these are the risk items that to develop integrated analytics tool, accuracy insight. So that is the strategy that you have for strengthening risk data analytics. So this is the risk that we already have recorded in the organization that you can actually look at. And you can add this as a risk for your strategy, or you can just view it and realize that you're actually adding risk tied to this particular strategy that you're otherwise not able to do. So now that you're actually seeing strategy, and as I mentioned, you don't have to get outside of this application to do risk management. You collaborate, you engage. When I say collaborate, you can like literally share your entire, just copy this risk item, send it via, your Slack or your chat item, and actually engage your staff members. And then finally, we have Ask Ira, where you can actually talk about not necessarily how to, write a homework, not necessarily how to like deliver, say, a particular math question, but rather it's really tied with individual risk-related questions, and you can ask risk of. On the same vein, we can have the risk of water contamination. Those two. Cool mind. So now what we're doing is we're actually sending this query, and this query is now looking at taking the aggregate organizational data, taking the aggregate risk related data, and pulling the resolutions that are tied to it, and looking at all the different views, and based on that, it is actually giving you a idea that, hey, have you considered these areas? So you're not going outside of this application, but rather single location. This is your risk management platform where all risk and all risk related issues can be resolved. So the board member can use a single tool to not only identify risk, look at AI competence, look at strategy and risk resolution. And our clients literally love this idea that, okay, I don't have to go to, say in this case, Claude, I don't have to go to Copilot. Rather, it's not another screen, it's not a swivel chair operation. It's really the same application. You can actually do all of these activities from one place. So finally, I want to go to root cause analysis. So as you guys, sorry, not root cause analysis, we already did this. The RCSA, which is a risk and control self-assessment. You can now identify or see how your risk based on your appetite, it actually changes. You can actually look at, say, maybe from a start date of November to current date. We can look at, you can actually simulate and see how the views actually changes. You can actually look at below risk tolerance and say, you know what, obviously only the within risk area, obviously above risk appetite, and you can see all of the views and everything on the duration of time that you just selected, and those views are all provided in this area. You can actually then start changing that, what if scenarios, if my risk appetite actually changed from 16 to say 13, and if it was, risk tolerance was in this case, 9, you can actually simulate that, and that actually provides you another simulation, another risk score, where you can see all the different aggregate value for the score. Not only can you see the aggregate value, but you can actually see the the total risk score reduction, the controls associated with the risk. You can actually visualize it all over here. So it's that risk and control relationship and control and risk relationship. You don't have to go to, different organizations, different views, different locations. Rather, you're just looking at it from this one platform. This one platform provides you with all the different views that you're looking at. So as I mentioned, your RCSA overview, risk associated with the control, controls associated with the risk. You're simulating what happens when there's a change. You're getting real-time views and dashboards tied to it. You can actually reset it, and again go back to your original view. You can also, look at a specific time period. In this case, I believe in the month of January, and yeah, so you can actually simulate that, and that also like further changes the time period. So now you're looking at a shorter time period, all the way from December to February only. So this is the view that you can actually generate on a regular basis, and then you might say, you know what? So I think we only focus on environmental risk, but you can actually remove, or you can say that, hey, you know what? I want to see. Let me see if I can. So, okay, so we only have few technical risks. So your aggregate value of the technical risks that you have, you can actually see that the risk items that are tied with that, you can see that. And again, as I mentioned, now that the threshold is way, way down, you can see that, you know what, this does not impact risk or risk-related discussion in the organization as of right now. And this as a report, this is again a report that goes to the board. Okay, so again, environmental risk. So that pretty much covers all the aspects that a board member, they don't have to go to an external tool to support the organization towards identifying risk, discovering risk resolution, risk control, root cause analysis, strategy, identifying new risk on a free flow level, and finally using risk and control self-assessment to identify risk and controls relationship. So this as a view is present via IRA on top of already your manual risk entry, risk register application, etc., on top of the very objective that you can actually utilize business rules to say that these are my rule set towards getting this data aggregated and delivered. But folks, I've taken lots of time. I do want to stop the presentation right now.